Presenting Benny Goodman and his music.
All right. Now we're moving. Okay. Yes, Miles. Evening, Chris. Evening, Karen. Hey, Timothy. Hey, Martin. Hey, Dina. Hey, Kathy. Miles making his contractual appearance already. Hey, Bruce. Hey, Bob. Hey, Laura. Ready for a very classy evening here.
Gentlemen, the man with the torrid clarinet and the even more torrid band who pervades
Oh,
the
yes.
rhythm
Very
all
classy.
in the urban room of the Congress Hotel in Chicago.
You got it, man.
And first of all, one of Irving Berlin's greatest hits.
Hey, Steve. Hey, Betsy. Hey, Evelyn and Dawn. Hey, Heather and Timothy. Hey, Heather. Evening, Gary. Oh, yes. Very classy evening tonight. This was one of our first virtual tours, you know. And it's never really been totally redone. I was going to redo it more today, but instead I identified a new Johann Hawkwife who has never been in a list of his stuff before. I found all kinds of important records related to him. Haybird and Mary Jo. Hey, Jeff. Hey, Timberley. Donna, don't even think about it. Still feeling like summer. Hey, Timberley. Hey, Lehman. Hey, I wouldn't have to tell you mature if you actually were. Hey, Rodney. I'm kind of partying today. I solved some mysteries. In the process of putting together my great Johann Hawk timeline. Evening, everybody. See, this is what I've been working on. All these, no. Cancel. There. And to figure out an actual timeline for where he was when, who he married when. It's tricky. Gene, yeah, it's on Facebook. As far as I know, it's on. I'm getting a lot of comments on Facebook, so I assume it is. Emery. Hey, Cherie. Hey, Tom. Hey, Debbie.
Sorry, I don't have a phone number for Ross Berman. Who would you like to call?
Huh? Hey, Laura. Glad to have you. Hey, Eileen. Hey, everybody. Hey, euphoniums. Hey, Nancy. Alright, sometimes Facebook is bad about notifications. It just happens. There's nothing I can do about it. Hey, Cindy. Hey, ML. Hey, Shelby. Hey, Jenna. A lot of people creep on in. And sometimes these notifications come late, sometimes they don't come. If you're not getting them, best thing to do is turn them off and back on. There's no button I push to send out notifications or anything, or to select who gets them. Hey, Lee.
And Helen Ward singing With All My Heart.
Hey, Susan. Hey, everybody. Still got Miles up here on the desk. Kind of blended in right now. Gonna switch this over for a second here. Evening, everybody. Hey, Kathleen. A lot of euphoniums here. Awesome. Miles. He's gonna tear up this jacket, this smoking jacket, I swear. I had to stop using the belt because he'll chase it. Hey, Laura. My heart, I say I love you dearly. Hey, Megan. Hey, Susan. Hey, Miles. Hey, Katie. This isn't their most political message by any means. They did once have the one, they were selling Trump footlongs, which were 3-inch hot dogs. Hey, Shelby. Hey, Chris. Hey, Ed. Shelby, I gotta warn you, every town within a 10-mile radius, a 10-hour drive radius of here, says exactly the same thing about the gangsters. Not even just the large ones like Des Moines. Hey, Christy. Did Hawk kill the new wife I found? No, I don't believe so. Although the weird thing is trying to figure out why he killed the ones that he did. Javier asked, what is my favorite record? What a great question. If I gotta pick just the one, leaving out the Bob Dylans, of course. Masterpieces by Ellington. Or possibly Time Out of Mind. But lately, I have been enjoying Elsa Lanchester sings bawdy Cockney songs. She was Katie Nana, the nanny who quits at the beginning of Mary Poppins. Also, the Bride of Frankenstein.
Benny Goodman goes way back and gets a lot of rhythm out of Walt, Jenny,
Hey, Grandma Bell.
Benny Goodman and his orchestra.
Oh yeah, I was like, I don't want to see this on your page, but tough. It's like, so you can censor comments? Yeah, I can. Like, this page is not a safe space for the people who want to... Well, I looked at that guy's profile. It was all just Chicago police scanner shit. This is not a page for people who want to talk about how Chicago's a hellhole. It's not a place for people to post their racist memes. Like, so many Chicago groups and so many, like, local history groups. Forgotten Des Moines, I had to leave. Forgotten Chicago, same, or Lost Des Moines, or whatever it was. Because, you know, everything was just an invitation for people to make racist comments. We don't do that here. If I catch you doing that, you're out of here. If you're a regular and something came out wrong, I'm willing to think maybe that just came out wrong. But you know who these people are. Well, there was the first person who said, "Oh, just stick to, just don't get political. You can keep your hot dog." Like, this is not political. Clapping back at anti-Semites is not political. Basically, if you're upset that Wiener Circle is expressing their opinions, hey, where you been? You know, Chicago has problems like every other city, but I happen to think this city rules. Oh, Marie, we've been getting those a lot. I got a whole... Is it, one of these fucking things? We've been getting a lot of those fake newspapers. They don't even make good toilet paper. Where they show all of the, specifically darkened mugshots of people of color next to Darren Bailey looking like the principal of a segregated high school. Hey, everybody, we'll give it another minute here.
And they all loved it. They all loved those passages when they played by Benny Goodman. And now another one just in the same vein.
And, I don't really get that modern political on here. Mostly I'm ripping on people from the 1850s around here. But this is my company. I'll do what the hell I want. I just don't really feel like I'm losing a lot of business. You know, Trump got like 2% in my neighborhood. Maybe it was 3. But he lost by 90-some points. Evening, RLE. Betsy, there was a wrong post coming up. He is November 12th. Initially, I put up the tour on the wrong day. Oh, Gene, that must have been Nadia. Yeah, if people get mad at me for ripping on anti-Semites, if I lose anti-Semites business, I probably didn't have it to start with, you know? People who don't like Jews probably aren't going to care much for me. Ani shote maske harif. Well, yeah, you guys definitely noticed the wrong day, but it's all corrected now. Sick is November 12th. The tour is at 2, his thing is at 4, so that should work out just about right. And yeah, this isn't a corporate gig. I don't care if somebody gives me a bad star rating. People can decode those things. Thank you, Kim. All right, we're going to get started here in just a second. In fact, I think it's time that we go ahead and move on. We'll let Benny continue a second here. Good evening, everybody. Welcome along to Mysterious Chicago. Hello, Gina. Hi, everybody. I'm Adam Seltzer from Mysterious Chicago Tours. We're bringing you tonight a very classy evening. Our guests tonight include Helen Carter, blowjob wanter, Abraham Lincoln, poop joke teller, Harold Fowler, testicle wanter, Eddie Brislane, testicle haver, Leopold and Loeb, accused testicle thieves, and Chicago bracing for 14 inches. It's going to be very classy around here tonight. Tonight isn't a parental advisory, explicit lyrics. I may say words like shit and other synonyms for excrement that others might find offensive. I might use intensifiers along the lines of fucking. I think you'll all probably survive. And if somebody wants to come and make a bad comment on it, look, if you voted for Donald Trump, you don't get to tell me you don't care. You get upset about swearing anymore. Obviously, you don't give a fuck about any of that shit. You're not the family values people anymore. And you never will be again. It was always bullshit to start with. Ozzy Osbourne was right about you guys. But all right, everybody, welcome along to Mysterious Chicago. I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours. This is almost nostalgic. I don't want to say that it's I feel nostalgic for the early days of the pandemic or anything, but this was one of our very first full-length virtual tours that we did 2.5 years ago now. I'd just been kind of talking about the stories that I couldn't tell. Thought this would be a fun one, so I think we only did 1 or 2 full-length ones before this. This might have been the first Thursday night, and I realized going through the deck, it's still a lot of setups that I don't really use anymore. But anyway, I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours. Author of such books as How to Get Suspended and Influence People, banned in Idaho for its flagrant overuse of the word ass, and the cover artwork, which they found highly offensive. You know how these people are. At least they hadn't learned the word groomer yet at the time. Smart Alex Guide to American History, which somehow doesn't seem to be pissing people off and still makes me dozens of dollars every year. H.H. Holmes, The True History of the White City Devil. Ghosts of Lincoln, which occasioned me to read up on a lot of Lincoln's poop jokes. Jefferson Davis, I don't know why I had this in the deck, but here's me flicking off Jefferson Davis. Here's Alexander Stevens, I got him too. Here's John Dillinger looking like he's awfully happy to be there on the slab. And here, what we're doing here, this is kind of illustrates, this is Mysterious Chicago. It's my company. I don't have any corporate overlords telling me not to do stuff, like not to point out this monument to Spearmint going up in Chicago, praising William Wrigley Jr. for not putting his name on the building in giant letters like some hoodlum. I get the occasional nasty comment about that. Like, remember last time I did one of the virtual boat tours, someone said, I hope you didn't just call the president a hoodlum. It's like, oh yeah, I fucking did. All right, welcome along, everybody. Today we are doing Mysterious Chicago After Dark. This is the very adult version where I tell the stories that I normally have to skip on the tours. Now, sometimes I do notice, hey, everybody here's over 18. I can go ahead and tell that story about Sissy Patterson today, or I can show that version of the Cardiff Giant photograph. But most of the time, I tend to leave these things off. I tend to try to keep the tours reasonably family-friendly, no matter what the ages are. But there are certain groups that I just can't resist doing things for. Like walking along here, coming up, one of the smaller obelisks. This was before Sigmund Freud, so nobody really thought specifically about what it meant to have a smaller obelisk. Nor did they think anything weird about it when Long John Wentworth wanted to have the biggest obelisk in the whole Midwest. I really do think it is not a coincidence that obelisks went out of fashion right around the time that people became aware of the works of Sigmund Freud. But over on the left of here we go, tilting. Here's Mr. Loomis, a businessman. Mr. Loomis used to take out ads such as this one, saying that he was for 50 years a sufferer until he discovered Dr. Horney's electromagnetic belt. Here's Dr. Horney himself. This is just the guy you want curing you. And here's Mr. Loomis himself, who used to wander around with Dr. Horney's electric belt, which was basically vibrating underpants. It could make your undies vibrate as you walked around through the loop. He said that this would cure what ails you. I don't know if it would cure what ails you, but it would probably be pretty fun. And Dr. Horney's belts do occasionally come up on eBay. Last time it did, I didn't manage to buy it. I don't know if this is the same one. This is Dr. Horney's electric belt, not electromagnetic. He said that you could recharge it, too. It didn't run on batteries. It was rechargeable. I don't know if it was like lithium-ion or what. But if anybody needs a new drag name, Dr. Horney, there you go. And right around there, in fact, is really one of the sadder graves at Graceland Cemetery, at least on the surface. It just says Mama's Grave. This is the mama right here. This is Helen Carter was her name. She died of apoplexy, which at the time just meant sudden death. She was the husband of a well-to-do man by the name of Mr. Carter. Down below there, that little cherubic little kid is her son, Leslie Carter, who is the subject of this story, who I normally leave off at the tours. Leslie Carter, down over here, as pictured here, grew up and got married to a woman by the name of Carolyn. She became Carolyn Carter, and eventually they underwent a really, really vicious divorce in which each of them accused the other of infidelity. While she accused him of it, he accused her of infidelity. She accused him more of just requesting unnatural acts. And I almost feel bad for the guys. This isn't a typical case where he was trying to force himself on anybody or anything back before marital rape was even a law. The basic story goes like this. He, on 3 occasions, requested, though never received, what newspapers variously referred to as an unnatural act or a crime against nature. If you read all of the surviving transcripts of the trial, you do manage to figure out exactly what it was, which was a blowjob. Now, on the night of the wedding, the impression I get from the story of the wedding night is she didn't really know what was going to happen on the wedding night, wasn't really prepared, or certainly knew about sex, but didn't think it was actually going to happen or anything. She said that she was too tired, and he said, well, instead, why don't we do it the French way? And then spent the next couple of hours trying to console her and saying, no, darling, I mean that women of all classes do it like that in France. I'm not saying you're, etc., etc. On a couple of other occasions, he requested a blowjob again. Never did get one, but this was considered highly shocking at the time. Now, in court, in fact, the newspapers went through every length they could to drag her through the mud. They started saying that even talking about this means that she must be the guilty party, even though she had objected to and the judge had forced her to do it. So after the divorce, she took her notoriety and went on stage. A lot of people tried to go on stage to take advantage of their front page scandals. She was about the only one who really did it successfully, but she also decided she would do it in such a way that would take revenge. She kept the name Mrs. Leslie Carter, the name she was usually referred to by during the press, And under the name Leslie Carter, she went first on the local stage, then moved on up to Broadway, then eventually she was into silent films, and she was still doing like old lady roles in Western movies well into the 1930s. Now, you can kind of contrast this with the 1920s when Peaches Browning married a guy she called Daddy. This was what they called the era of beautiful nonsense. When they went through their divorce trial, he also was accused of having requested an unnatural act. The unnatural act in this case was eating breakfast naked. We're going to move on up here. Let's check out. Well, first of all, in the Medill plot, one of the Medill daughters of Joseph Medill, the Chicago Tribune editor during the Civil War, had the best last words in the whole cemetery. She was watching a maid walk away and said, "My God, what a bottom." But there, behind him, is his granddaughter, the niece of the bottom looker, who is known as Sissy Patterson. Now, Sissy Patterson became editor of the Washington Record-Herald herself. It was a William Randolph Hearst paper that she eventually became the owner of. She was one of the first women to be the editor of a newspaper. Now, her editorial career, she did write some really good articles. She wrote one of the better interviews with Al Capone. There's a great article she did about Albert Einstein. Generally, people have talked more about her love life than they have about her editorial career, which is probably for the best, because if we're going to talk about her journalism, pretty soon we have to get to the fact that she just thought all these people were just being too alarmist worrying about Hitler. I mean, it's not like he's as bad as that Roosevelt guy, right? So we might as well just talk about her wild and crazy sex life. She is estimated to have had about 200 lovers, mostly though not all men, one of whom was in fact her son-in-law. Her daughter divorced her, long before Macaulay Culkin was doing things like that. There's quite a few stories about wild and crazy people and Nazi sympathizers at Graceland Cemetery. There's an empty space for Madcap Mary Farney, who was the heir to the Farney cough syrup name and money, the last great American cough syrup dynasty, though she occasionally claimed she didn't know what she was heiress to, just that she was an heiress. She married the designer Oleg Cassini, who later described her as one of the very few truly evil people he had ever met in his life. Now, perhaps the most famous story about Sissy, though, is one time she was involved in a love triangle with Alice Roosevelt, Teddy's daughter. They were both after the same guy. Alice was engaged to him, but one day Alice showed up at Sissy's desk and held up a hairpin and said, "I found this in my bed. I believe this is yours." Sissy graciously took the hairpin and said, "Did you check the chandelier? I can't find my panties." Credit where due, that's a hell of a burn. We'll also move in. This is the house where she grew up. Or over across the street is now that I've turned. Later, it was a high school in the 1950s. A friend of mine who went there said it was a school for the worst kids in the city. It was designed for the family by Stanford White. And it says it was designed for Sissy Patterson in 1891, though Sissy would have been like 9 years old at the time. Though, frankly, designing things for 9-year-old girls tracks when it comes to Stanford White. He famously took Evelyn Nesbit up to see his etchings. Really what he did was he gave her some drugs. Years before, he had been at the Pie Girl dinner, at which several different architects and artists around the New York area watched a 16-year-old girl dressed only in gauze or perhaps less jump out of a pie. Now, as I often say, architects of the day had, they were like rock stars in the 70s, nothing but debauchery. Eventually, Evelyn would get married and her husband would shoot Stanford White to death, but her husband Harry Thaw was also kind of a pig. In the 1920s, there was a party, that era of beautiful nonsense. There was a party in New York, at which one of the features was a 16-year-old girl from Chicago taking a bath in some champagne, which, of course, champagne wasn't even legal at the time. Great way to get a UTI, I would think. Now, she eventually came back to Chicago. She got married. She's at, which cemetery is that? St. Cassius Cemetery, under the name Teresa King, I believe. But anyway, at that party, Harry Thaw was present. Let's just move up here. A lot of stories like that. Like the number of age gap stories we've got here. People who are like 40 years older than their wives. People who kept getting older and older, but their wives stayed the same age. We get a lot of that here. Now, this is an absolutely magnificent grave for a woman named Jeanette Coe, who was the wife, died probably the cholera epidemic of 1849, of Dr. M.D. Coe, who we actually know a little bit about Dr. M.D. Coe. There's a transcript of a meeting he was at where he was where people were talking about their cases. He talked about a woman who would come into his office complaining of hysterical urination. Like anytime somebody touched her stomach, she would pee herself. So he diagnosed it as hysteria, being a 19th century doctor, and cured it with cannabis. Medical marijuana well back before it was cool. Now, just recently, I did the Lincoln Park Zoo tours over the course of the last month or so. Move over around here a little ways. Up to this cottage, which stands roughly on the spot where there was a barn where sculptors would work. They were probably doing gravestones for the old city cemetery back in the 1860s when it was around here. One day, a guy named George Hull came in, and I had a picture of him. Let me find that picture. It's not showing up in here. I must have changed the name. There we go. Yeah, George Hull came into the place and said, boys, I got a proposition for you. I got this 12-foot block of gypsum. I want you to carve it into a giant. I'll pay you $100 each. I got plans of my own. When they agreed to the deal, he stripped naked, got on the ground to pose for them. I don't know if they asked him to do this. It was just kind of like, now sculpt me, boys. Sculpt me like one of your French girls. So they sculpted him, in fact, into a giant. Tonight I will show you the uncensored version. So this is what they sculpted. You actually can kind of see the resemblance in his face there. He then took this out to Cardiff, New York, and buried it for a year, and then hired a guy to come dig up a well. And I want you to dig right here for the well, and tried to pass this off as an actual petrified giant. Now, for a couple of weeks, it was the biggest attraction in the whole Northeast, the Cardiff Giant. It's still a big deal today, still known as one of the great hoaxes of the 19th century. There's a copy in Fort Dodge, Iowa, where the block of rock was built, because, I grew up in Iowa. We had to stretch sometimes to get to interesting Iowa history stories back in the day. The original, I believe, is now in Cooperstown, New York, though it was in a guy in Des Moines' coffee table in his rumpus room as a conversation piece for many, many years. But it had been on display for a couple of months when a couple of the sculptors wrote in and say, well, Captain Hull never paid us, so here's the real story. So I keep looking, is he Jewish? Well, while we're at the zoo, we also, the zoo once objected to me talking about the Sphinx statues that used to be there. They were kind of controversial because they had nipples. They kind of didn't want me saying the word nipples in the live streams. But then again, have you guys been out to see the fountain out here? This fountain's got an awful lot of penises on it, and some butts. This is by Augustus St. Gaudens, who was also at the Pie Girl dinner, in fact. Now, we talk a little bit about on the tour about, just today I was driving eight into the train station, and a skunk ran in front of us. That happened to me a couple of times on the Lincoln Park Zoo tours, which reminded me of a famous skunk from the zoo from 1950. Merlin Perkins went on the Kukla, Fran, and Ollie show to talk about... To plug an upcoming Halloween special, and brought with him a skunk named Sweet William. Sweet William had an operation. He could no longer spray things, but he could still shit all over the place. Watch your notice here. There. Whoa! This is probably the first televised dump. Took me quite some time to get a hold of that video. The next day they were talking about, now, from now on, all animal guests on television programs will be screened for subversive tendencies. No communist skunks around here. But we love poop jokes around here. There's nothing about poop that isn't funny. Abraham Lincoln liked a good poop joke as well. Now, recently I was doing work on a case of his with a breach of promise case. Now, they lost the breach of promise case against a guy who had allegedly planned to marry this guy's daughter, but then not married her after getting her pregnant. But they did give him on trial for seduction, which everybody knew was just kind of a vague pretense of just punishing someone for misbehaving. But during the trial, witness after witness came forward to say, no, this guy's daughter was not difficult to seduce. We've all done it. Then Lincoln, in his final rebuttal, pointed out one of them and said, he says he's such a ladies' man, but I bet he's never entered the flesh but once, and that was when he fell and got his finger stuck in his ass. The judge in the trial Lincoln would later appoint to the Supreme Court. There is now a statue of Lincoln in a park named after the guy who was on trial at the time. But Lincoln also liked to tell a story, supposedly liked to tell a story. We've got this about second or third hand. When he was a kid, he had a friend by the name of Austin Gollaher. Now, according to a story told years later to Mr. Herndon, Abraham Lincoln's first big biographer, one day, a guy from the old hometown where Lincoln and Gollaher had lived in Kentucky came to the White House to discuss draft matters. Lincoln got the business out of the way first, then started asking about all the old families, in particular saying, now where's Austin Gollaher? I'd rather see him more than any man living because he played a dirty trick on me once and I want to pay him back. Seems they were out hunting squirrels, and when Austin decided to take a nap under a tree, Lincoln climbed up a branch and said, quote, I decided I would shit in his hat. But then when I let the load drop, he switched hats with me, so my hat caught the whole charge. So here's Abraham Lincoln. And here's how Austin Gollaher looked by the 1890s. He wouldn't have looked this bad at the time. But there's Abraham Lincoln plotting to help the Union win the war, and also, at the same time, plotting to shit in an old man's hat. I love that. You know, there's any number of it. It's something I raised a few eyebrows with. You can see, like, sometimes when I'm doing interviews about the Graceland book, one of my standard lines is, you know, these were regular people. They sang songs, they played games, they got diarrhea, they fell in love, they fell out of love, they got diarrhea again. Kind of shocks people every now and then, but you know, that is just a fact of life. It's something deeply personal that everybody can relate to. And of course, it is going to come up a lot when we talk about cholera. Chicago had several cholera waves, 1849, 1854, and 1866. And now and then you do see that reflected on the gravestones. Just zip over here to Lizzie Coombs. Poor Lizzie. Lizzie Coombs died of cholera. We now know a little bit better about what spreads cholera. Basically, this is saying, here lies Lizzie Coombs. She ate shit and died. So that's what it is. You spread cholera by getting infected fecal matter into your mouth. At the time, they specifically said that they warned against getting involved in flatulence. Avoid foods that cause flatulence. Avoid getting around flatulent people. They didn't really know how it spread yet, but they had the idea that bad air was part of it, and that would have included farts. Now, there have recently been some studies done. People wondered, if I fart, will it contaminate an area? They actually had a couple of tests done, which consisted of people farting in petri dishes. What they found was that a fart will not really spread if you're wearing underwear. Same reason wearing a mask does in fact stop you from spreading germs. It doesn't stop you from all of them, but it'll keep you from contaminating the area. Same thing, if you fart without your underwear on and fart directly onto the petri dish, there will be all kinds of bacteria on there. If you keep your underwear on, it'll catch pretty much all of it. So you could, in fact, possibly spread cholera by farting on things, but only if you're farting, like, directly on their food while you're bare-assed, which you probably shouldn't be doing anyway. No, sir. Cholera got a lot of good people. Dr. Daniel Brainerd, for instance. And if you look at, like, there's a good likeness of him. If you look at, like, the interment records from Graceland, October of 1866, it's just cholera, 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 both Lizzie Coombs and Dr. Brainerd that same month. And where are all these things here? And it's been a long time since I did this particular presentation. That's Coombs again. That's Brainerd again. I guess I redid that one. Well, let's go talk about Jeremiah Price. Now that they've redone the Graceland entrance, I won't be able to do Jeremiah Price for a while. We don't really get that close to him on the current routes. So Jeremiah Price was a guy who died in the 1854 cholera epidemic right after going to a doctor and saying, I have quite a diarrhea. And the doctor said, is it the color of rice? And Jeremiah Price would have said, yes it is. And the pharmacist said, well, that's the first symptom of cholera. You should get to a doctor immediately, at which point Jeremiah Price said, no, I'll just take some peppermint lozenges, please. So he died. People have started leaving peppermints and peppermint lozenges on the gravestone now. I think that's the best. If I have no further legacy than getting people to leave peppermint lozenges on the grave of the man who did his own research, that'll be okay by me. Also, when you first come into Graceland, normally the first thing you see is Eli B. Williams, who I usually don't really talk about on tours because I can't find anything really interesting to say about that guy, except that little Louise de Koven Bowen, when she was just a little kid, stole all of his gooseberries one time and got such explosive diarrhea that she never stole again. She, in fact, became a great social reformer. So that may be Eli B. Williams' greatest contribution, giving Louise de Koven Bowen the scoots. And while we're talking about scoots, of course, let's move back here a little. Here's Field Elementary, up here in Rogers Park, named after Eugene Field, who was known as the poet of childhood. Such famous poems as Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod. Here's Mr. Field himself. He used to hang out at A.C. McClurg's Saints and Sinners Corner, where they kept all the rare and curious volumes. Now, he's generally known for his children's poetry and his humor columns at the time. It was a really big deal for a long time. I mean, he's got a whole churchyard all to himself up in Kenilworth. But he also wrote this thing called 3 Poems. This was some poems that he wrote to get into a secret club. You had to write 3 naughty poems. So he did, including this one, Socratic Love, which is considered by the Oxford English Dictionary the first published use of the word poop in its modern noun and verb form. Now, the word, of course, has been around for centuries, but usually it meant fart. There was also a period when it just meant your butt. Think of like the poop deck. So, in the poem Socratic Love, all about Socrates and Alcibiades, I'm never sure I'm pronouncing that right, but really, Alki had a crush on Socrates. Socrates historically is said not to have reciprocated. In the poem, he sure as hell did. It ends with the lines, he packed his semen deep into that colon soft and callow, so whence thereafter Alki pooped, the poop was mostly tallow. Both noun and verb form right there, generally considered the first published use of both. He also wrote this fine poem on Julia unlacing herself, on his wife who is buried beside him in that churchyard in Kenilworth. Tell if thou canst, and truly, whence doth come this camphor, storax, spikenard, galbanum, these musks, these ambers, and these other smells, sweet as the vestric of the oracles. I'll tell thee. While my Julia did unlace her silken bodice but a breathing space, the passing air such odor then assumed, as when to Jove great Juno goes perfumed, whose immortal body doth transmit a scent that fills both heaven and earth with it. 'Tis when my Julia sheds her hose, that there is wafted to my nose an odor with such spices fraught that I esteem all others not. And when she belches, what a smell of heliotrope and asphodel! And when my Julia breaks her wind, there issues from her fair behind a breath that I become, I ween, a Pallas or a Paphian queen. No hollow clamor speaks the birth of this etherical child of earth, but hot and swift it mounts the air, dispensing savor everywhere. Swooning with ecstasy, I kiss the heaven that breathed this gale of bliss. It's really a very nice poem about his wife farting. It's really very nice of him. Let's move on a little bit here. Stanley McCormick and his wife and his mother, Nettie McCormick. Well, that's kind of a Freudian slip, or it would have been on his part. Nettie McCormick was the wife of Cyrus McCormick, one of my least favorite guys at Graceland Cemetery. He used his newspaper to spread absolute frothing at the mouth racist sentiment. Stanley was only about 4 or 5 when the old man died. He was raised largely by his mother Nettie, who well into his 20s made him keep his bedroom door open, subjected him to things like breath checks. There's a novel about Stanley and his wife Catherine Dexter McCormick that has like a flashback scene in which Stanley is about 6 years old and his older sister comes in and pees in front of him while he's taking a bath just so he can see what it's like when women pee. Really, it was his mother, and he was considerably older than 6 or 7 at the time. But he eventually kind of lost, he would now be diagnosed as probably schizophrenic, and his wife, Catherine Dexter, was a biologist, a graduate of MIT. She knew it was something wrong with his endocrine system, not just because he had an abusive governess and his mom was a little bit, by all accounts, a little bit nuts, we shall say. But from what I can tell from what's leaked of the medical records, and they're all up in Wisconsin if I want to go out there sometime, he had a foot fetish, he was into flushing his foot down the toilet, and once he was locked up, he didn't see Catherine or any woman for years and years. When she eventually inherited money, she used it to almost single-handedly fund the research behind the first birth control pill. What else have I got in here anyway? Again, it's been a long time since I did this deck. And that is the old Stevens Hotel. That's as it appeared at the time. Jimi Hendrix stayed there in 1968 while he was playing at the Auditorium just down the block. This was probably the time at which he met Cynthia Plastercaster, who only just recently passed away, remained a fixture here in Chicago for years. And while in the hotel, she made a plaster cast of his penis. While we're speaking about large penises, I gotta cover the Biograph story. This is John Dillinger's Alley, the Biograph Theater, all redone for the movie Public Enemies. It was really cool to walk around that set. More fun than the movie, in fact. Also, here's a guy with 6 fingers on one hand. Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. But this is in the alley back behind the old Biograph Theater, or running alongside of it anyway. This is where John Dillinger was shot to death by the FBI, and this is a picture of him on the slab in the morgue. It is rigor mortis that makes his on his arm, making this tent-like shape, but it does make it look like he's not only on the slab, but awfully happy to be there. And I used to show this picture on tours back in my weird Chicago days when my driver was a guy named Willie. And I say, well, look at him, man. If that was not his arm, if he ever got excited, he'd probably die of blood loss to the brain. And I'd be like, I don't know, Willie, is that a problem? And he'd be like, no, not really. You get a little bit lightheaded, that's about it. Yeah, we got to compare Jimmy's to the cart of giants. Well, so we can cover a little bit of the Levy District while we're at it. There's also, of course, there used to be the Sands, which was not ornamental to our morals, about where Streeterville is now. Then there was the Levy District. Down here, the bars had names like the Bucket of Blood and Bedbug Row, down around 20th, 21st, Cullerton, what is now Chinatown. Right about here, where currently stands these Bertrand Goldberg old folks' homes, was the site of the Everleigh Club, which was the fanciest place the fanciest of all the houses of ill repute in Chicago. It was the one that had the best reputation. They had things like the Rose Room. If you spent less than like the equivalent of $1,500 a month adjusted for inflation, you would be kicked out of there real fast. Right around the corner was Madame Vic Shaw's place, which was not quite so fancy, but might have gotten a little bit more creative. There's Vic Shaw herself. If you watched the Time Travel Pub Crawl last week, we talked a little bit about Lil the Whipper, who worked at Madame Shaw's. And these places were so well known in Chicago, there was even a guidebook published for them, the Sporting and Clubhouse Directory. We'll put on the inside of it. They would list all of these places with like one-line reviews of them. But then they also talked about 4th Avenue, which was Wells Street. Now, the one before Wells Street, like Plymouth. We have French houses. The following are French, and prices range from $1 up. We can say nothing in regard to them, except in a general way they are safe. Everybody knows what a French house is, just as well as everybody knows where the shamrock grows, and we need offer no further explanations. In any case, well, French, we already talked about what French meant when we talked about Helen and Leslie Carter back then, remember? There's also, most of the advertisements in them were actually geared towards people with vaginas, which is rather interesting. But eventually the Vice Commission came along and shut everything down, writing books like The Social Evil in Chicago. Though Reverend Williams was often, though various people involved in it were often caught misbehaving, naturally. They used to have midnight revels of this guy who was really just like buying people privileges. And then there was Major Funkhauser, who was Chicago's film censor. Any silent film that got screened in the 1910s here, he had to watch first and trim out all of the possibly objectionable scenes. Eventually, it turned out that he was charging his friends to come to parties to watch the objectionable scenes, which was really quite illegal. Now, also, of course, I got in the Great World's Fair of 1893 was the Zoopraxographical Hall, in which Edward Muybridge, the early motion picture pioneer, would show lectures about animal locomotion. It was they didn't really market it as a moving picture show. It was, for all practical purposes, the first paid movie theater, but it was a complete flop. The belly dancers next door outsold him literally 1,000 to 1. One suspects that maybe if he had advertised it with found a way to project his other motion studies of naked people doing exercises, he might have done a little bit better. I don't get too much trouble with Facebook for those. But all right. To wrap things up, I know what you guys have really come around here for. The 7th grade section. There is something that happens at cemeteries that I call the 7th grade effect. You're surrounded by all these monuments to mortality and inevitably reminders of your own eventual demise. As such, occasionally your inner 7th grader will kick in. And as a defense mechanism, a way of doing what psychologists call distancing death, one might start finding tombstone names hilarious. Some people find this disrespectful. Personally, I think it is psychologically necessary, and I always encourage just people to go for it. Like, this is Frederick F. Spencer, who was a hardware guy. A really fuzzy face over there. But he's got the for fuck's sake grave. And of course, over at oh, wrong seven. I got oh man, I got so many on here. It's all out of order. We'll just start at Mr. Butts over here, who was ran a pharmacy on Clark and Chestnut. As I say, like names like Fanny and Johnson start to seem hilarious to you. Or there even is a Fanny Johnson over at Graceland Cemetery. Best of both worlds. Up in Wisconsin, at that cemetery I went to in Milwaukee, there were some particularly good ones. Brown Droppers I thought was hilarious. And right across from Brown Droppers was some graffiti just saying, shit. And this lovely fog, I'm still just in love with the footage I got on this foggy day at Rose Hill a couple of years ago. This is the 7th grade section. That is A.B. Dick, inventor of the mimeograph machine. I have had nuns crack up at A.B. Dick. It'd be funnier if his first name was Anita, of course. And that's just the beginning of the 7th grade section. Next to him is an elocutionist named Robert Cumnock. C-U-M. Down the road is that orb is Coming Cherry, the big ball. And this is the aforementioned largest obelisk in the Midwest for Long John Wentworth. His name being Long John wasn't enough. Seems like we're missing some footage here. But also elsewhere in Rose Hill Cemetery, of course, is Abraham Titsworth, the tailor. Down at Oakwood Cemetery, we ran into a printer by the name of George Titman. And this one I just love. If you need a good drag name or a roller derby name or something, you need look no further than Elsie Titley. And then not too far from Dr. Victor Frankenstein at Rose Hill, there's Dick Pick. It's actually it's on both sides too. You just can't avoid the dick pic when you're passing it. But of course, the champ of them all, down at Oakwood Cemetery, we have got Harry Sex, who even has a sex bench in his plot. But Harry Sex was the guy's name. And even in the 1940s, people would make cracks about that. If I were him, I would have changed my name to Harold Sachs the minute I got to Ellis Island. He went by Harry Sex, and the Chicago Tribune in the 1940s said that it would be that he made the phone book obscene. This is why we should not have the phone book in the hands of the very young, which should not be because, well, it mentions sex. Yes, on page 1246 we find Harry Sex, to say nothing whatever of Leon Sex, and oh, some more shudders. There's Helen Dam in our book. Goodness, think of little Angelina, aged 8. Won't somebody please think of the children? Maybe we should move out to the suburbs where we're safer. No, here we are in Aurora. Home of Joseph Assman, who was not too far away from a guy whose name was Hilarious. You know, there was actually a Pope Hilarious. He was not very funny at all. And of course, this is by no means limited to Chicago. up here at Trinity Cemetery. Trinity Churchyard Cemeteries uptown. Is Mr. Abraham Koch.
Cannot get over what a gorgeous
All right,
day it is at the
everybody. Oh,
cemetery.
Jesus, look at some
I get a lot of
TikToks up
questions
here.
about like.
That be. All right, quick plug for the upcoming stuff. Next Thursday, I'll get back to you on that. We've still got 1 or 2 tickets left for Rose Hill Cemetery on Saturday, quite a few more for Graceland on Sunday, and Saturday the 12th, we're doing the True Crime Tour at Graceland Cemetery. I just found the new new Johann Hawk connection there. And once again, if you guys are on the Patreon for the H.H. Holmes and Hawk and other antique serial killers tier, there's going to be a really cool one tomorrow. I found the new Johann Hawk wife that I can pretty well confirm, but has never been mentioned in a list of his wives before. So, once again, lots of cool stuff coming up here. Scroll down. How far back do we go? Should you need a sweatshirt or a hoodie for those cold months, go to cafepress.com/MysteriousChicago. And with that, everybody, we will put the Benny Goodman back on and hang out like we always do. Thanks for joining me, all you classy cats and kittens out there. I can handle blustery. I'm okay with that. Well, of course, the very best name. I'm sure I got the, Gotta pull this out of my Nashville pictures. Yeah, there we go. Let me just export. My favorite, born under the name Lady Savage, married a farmer named Jim Butts. Both names are on her gravestone, so her name is Lady Savage Butts. You think you got the coolest name ever? Zorka Todorov I still think is an awesome name. But Lady Savage Butts is the champ of them all. The calendar you can get is on Lulu. If you go to adamchicago.com, there's a link to the calendar on there. Speaking of, I got to take down the Mystericon thing. It's probably getting in the way by now.
And that would put rhythm in the beat of a wooden Indian. That was the bugle call rang, Benny Goodman's own arrangement. Now, the popular tune, Thanks a Million.
Thank you, Kathy. Hey, where'd the Benny go? Oh, wrong window. Sorry, that's on me. I changed out of the wrong window. The kind of thing I would do. I've been so distracted the last couple of days. I'm trying to, I'm supposed to be like cooling down a little bit now. There's less going on, etc. But I got so wrapped up in the Johann Hawk research. Now, Benny's just not starting again.
Presenting Benny Goodman.
Come on. There we go. Usually when you see the Cardiff Giant on display now, they've got like a leaf over him. right. Lace Effect would be a Chicago drag name. Well put. Hey, Alex.
The bugle call rang. Benny Goodman's own arrangement. Now, the popular tune, Thanks to
Wait a minute. What am I being dared to do, Kathy? Let me scroll back. Are you going to put all the Hawk facts together and make it interesting? That's kind of what I do, yeah. I want to tie him into some other stuff that was going on at the time, like the way the media was evolving and things. But yeah, so far what I've got here is just all of the facts. I won't even write all of the facts into the book. We can just, a few of these we can just say in a paragraph. Married and deserted in the space of about a week. Because the stories of him, of his various marriages usually get a little bit repetitive after a while. I'm up to about 17 or 18 that I can confirm. I'm just having some regular old bourbon tonight. In particular, my main focus of research tomorrow in the microfilm room is not so much Hawk himself, though I will get the stuff that I'm missing for the trial, but really I want to get some more of a certain columnist's columns from the build-up before it. Unfortunately, the Chicago Evening American is missing in the microfilm reels. I don't think there's a single reel that exists that has May and June of 1905 when Johann Hawk was on trial, which is a huge loss for this story. Krista, that sounds good. I should read that book. Is it Dana Stevens? All right. I've been very busy with Bob Dylan's new book. This is going to keep me busy for a while. It's really just him kind of rambling, using songs as writing prompts. But now and then, I think he gets more autobiographical than he does in his actual autobiography. Good night, David. Cindy, I have checked everybody that I can find that has a microfilm reel of Chicago Evening American from 1905. Everybody's missing the same gap. Most of the universities don't have the Evening American. Most of them just have a couple of the bigger Chicago papers. But I'll have to check with the maybe the Abraham Lincoln Library will have it. I was hoping I could do like a good couple of Springfield days of research, but they can't really find the Hawk stuff in Springfield. I've got them looking, because there should be a clemency file for him. It's interesting, the recurring characters from the H.H. Holmes book kind of make it a sequel. A few people from the Holmes story make cameos here. One of Holmes's lawyers got involved in the Hawk case. A couple of Holmes's neighbors got called in. Good night, Jessica. Molly, good luck with that. Hopefully cholera is not an issue for you anyway.
Benny Goodman presents On the Alamo.
Good night, Mom. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways. Well, Huck was also spelled it like 9 different ways. But when Ashley said it's Huck, like when you huck the Kaiser. Heather, I'm looking for 2 particular months of the Chicago Evening American that is absent from every microfilm reel. Every place I've found, there's only a few places that have the Chicago Evening American, but everybody I write to, they're missing the same issues. Good night, Cindy. Good night, Dawn. Hey, Robert. Now, I do kind of want to get the Pullman probate file at the History Museum one of these days. I know they've got it. Somebody on my Twitter was telling me they've got the mortician's contract that details exactly what went into the grave. I'm not sure if he's serious, because earlier he was telling me he was buried in a lead coffin. Boy, was it heavy. It's like, you didn't lift it. Come on. He just sounded like one of those guys who wants to lecture me about how H.H. Holmes had a medieval rack in the basement. Thanks, Ed. I just got the alert about it. Early, I think they just never bothered to preserve them. It just happens sometimes. Kathy, at Adam Seltzer, what? Should be Adam Chicago for the Venmo. Or the PayPal. Well, PayPal is like adam@mysteriouschicago.com. Cornelius Billings. No, I don't think I have. Who's he? Tell me more. Well, let me quick Google him.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and we stay right in the urban room of the Congress.
Well, books and tours should be right, Kathy.
And some more to Benny Goodman and his orchestra, and hear Helen Ward sing Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
Oh, he was into wholesome trotting races. Wholesome trotting races, not one of those races where they sit down right on the horse. No, I never looked for him. We'll do that tomorrow, maybe. I won't look it up any further. Should be a nice, easy one, but I might be at Graceland tomorrow anyway. If it's, is he supposed to be blustery? What's the weather supposed to be? Tomorrow. Yeah, if it's going to be cloudy, I'm going to want to be there anyway, looking for coyotes. Yes, cloudy tomorrow. Chance of rain. That's coyote-looking weather. All right, I'm just going to leave that Wikipedia page up. I think there's a great picture, so I'm not scrolling all the way down. Graceland stuff is usually pretty easy to find for me. That's the saying, high and low, hear it everywhere you go, any time of day. Valley sings it, wise men wings it, even Mr. Crosby sings it. Dylan has some interesting notes about Mr. Crosby in his section on Bing's version of the Whippin' Poof song, which he describes as, you know, it's worth even actually just reading a bit of this. The Whippin' Poof song is like the theme song of the Yale Whippin' Poofs, the a cappella group. Their song is like all these cryptic references to them as a secret society, little lambs who've lost their way. Ba, 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 which he notes that Bing sings without a trace of irony. He says, this is a song of gentlemen rankers off on a spree, doomed from here to eternity. This song belongs to everybody, the fraternal order, the political machine, the silent majority, and the wealth of nations. It's predetermined, ordained, and comes right out of the book of fate. Terrifying and hopeless, guaranteed to keep your spirits up. It's standoffish and inaccessible, a Kabbalistic song with a coded message. Sing it and it becomes entirely yours.
And we'll let the title speak for itself. Benny Goodman presenting Madhouse.
From the tables down at Morey's to the mysterious Louis in the dear old Temple Bar, words of wisdom for those in the know. It paraphrases Kipling and lists a couple of songs no one's ever heard. Let me go find Miles. There's Priya's over on the couch. Miles? Where are you, Miles? Miles. Hey, Priya, come on. Alright, so Miles already showed up before the show, so he's made his contractual appearance already. Here's Priya for you guys. Priya, you're getting better at this. Gonna say bye-bye to everybody, Priya? Okay. Miles, I'm guessing, is buried in the dark recesses of the closet, which is one thing I haven't gotten around to cleaning yet. Priya's a delightful cat. She's getting more and more cuddly. These days she likes to just get on your chest or your lap and purr, 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 purr. All right, everybody. So thanks a lot for joining me today. Working on settling into my postseason schedule, though I'm really not there yet. Still got a few tours coming up. So, all right, thanks a lot for joining me, everybody. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours, telling everybody to stay safe and stay strong. I'll see you tomorrow for Find a Grave Friday, and until then, stay spooky, everybody. Now, no cheating and looking ahead.